everyone. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to the Bowling University studio from the International Bowling Campus in Arlington, Texas. I'm John Karabatsis, and I'll be your host for this edition of the Bowling University Profit Break. Our mission here at the university is to enrich people's lives personally and professionally, and the Profit Break is an opportunity for sharing insights on how to grow revenue, reduce costs, and enrich yourself, your team, and your business. If you're joining the Profit Break for the first time, welcome. We're glad you're here. Stay with us for the next 15 minutes, and you'll be on your way to improving profitability. Our special guest for this episode is Mr. Howard McAuliffe. Howard has 25 years' experience in operations and product management in the world of family entertainment. Currently, Howard is the Vice President of Pinnacle Entertainment Group, a consulting firm that brings decades of operating experience to shorten the learning curve and maximize operations for their clients. Today, Howard will be talking about Cranes, the most profitable game in the arcade. Howard, thanks for spending your time with us. Great to see you again.
Great to see you too, JK. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Let's jump right in here. Now, first, let me ask you about that title. Okay, so the most profitable game in the arcade. Now, Cranes, in my experience, do pretty well, but they certainly aren't the highest revenue on typically. So, how can they be the most profitable?
Yeah, that's well, a lot of salespeople probably will disagree with me because they like to quote at trade shows that, you know, this game, so-and-so game makes $500 a week, costs $10,000, so it pays back in 20 weeks. But the profitability of a machine has to be looked at in multiple ways, not just a simple, cash flow for the first week that it's in the arcade. So you want to look at what that machine pays out. And Cranes pay out a little more than other games, but they need to be managed. And that's part of what we'll talk about today, because I think a lot of bowling center operators don't manage their payouts like they should, because it's not on the card system reports every week. You have to do a little bit of manual work to know what it is, but that payout is really important. The other thing that's really important is the popular life of the game. So, if you bought one of the new VR systems, for example, 3 years ago, the sales have probably dropped off quite a bit. If you were running it well, you made money, it still was a good thing to buy. But after a few years, it starts to become less popular and those weekly sales numbers drop. Whereas a crane, when we ran our route, we had cranes that were on the route for 10 years. And I see some by good crane operators that are 20 plus years old, because you can maintain them and keep them clean and, make sure you change the lights and keep the parts functioning. But that same machine can earn for, 15, 20 years. So looking at the period of time that the machine's making money is also part of the profitability. The other one is sales per square foot. So how much space is the machine taking up? A crane is generally, 3.5 feet by 2. It's one of the smaller machines in an arcade. You could put 2 or 3 cranes in the space of a regular game, much less something big like a giant crane. So, you only have so many square feet in your arcade. So you have to be thinking about, how much square footage the machine's taking up when you're thinking about profitability. So when you look at all those factors, a crane really should be one of the most profitable machines in the arcade if it's properly managed.
That puts it in a little different perspective. I understand where you're going with that now, but I think you said a key word there, which is really important with cranes, and that is properly managed. Tell us a little bit more about that. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, the cranes, they take a little bit more work than a typical redemption game, or certainly a video game. So you have to first of all merchandise the machine. So when you look at, we like to use a lot of these examples like on the slide here of retail. When you go to a grocery store, you see the apples and the produce is always stacked up nicely, facing the customer. Everything's shiny, and there's typically someone in that room. I think he's back here. It's hard to see on the smaller slide on the small screen, but there's usually someone in there constantly filling those areas, and that's because they know that it sells more produce. So yeah, you could throw a barrel of apples there, and people could still get enough apples, but they don't do that. They display the product nicely. Similarly, on the bottom, you see if you look at the cereal, if you walk down a cereal aisle, the eyes are facing out of the characters on the boxes. Mm-hmm. And those boxes are placed generally where their target audience is. So the eyes for little kid cereal are facing down. And there's science behind this, that there's a connection between the consumer and the eyes on those products. And it's very similar when merchandising a crane. You want the machines to be well merchandised. So it's going to be, here's typical. So this is what you'll see. And most bowling centers I go into, frankly, you see something like this. Mm-hmm. And it makes sense, right? You're busy in a bowling center. You got a restaurant to manage, you have a bar to manage, you have bowling to manage, and you have an arcade and entertainment. So the crane is a small piece of that mix. So a lot of times it's like, oh no, the crane's empty, and someone runs over and dumps prizes in, and it looks like this. And that's lowering the amount of revenue that you're doing in that machine, because you're not taking care of the details like a retailer. So look at this crane on the right, Pinnacle. Not related to our Pinnacle, but we do like the name of the crane. You see, it looks very much like those apples. The eyes are facing out. It's stacked up nicely. And you can also, a little different method of merchandising where you don't fill it quite so much. If you have a single product, sometimes this is with licensed product, or a lot of times we like to do even a theme generic. That's a really nice prize. You just do one layer, but still things are neatly in there. The machine's clean. The eyes are still facing out like the cereal boxes. But someone has taken some effort to do that. And this is not easy to do, right? The busiest times are when this most needs to be done. So someone has to be doing this a lot of times, a few times a night, on a busy Friday or Saturday to constantly be filling the machine and keeping everything looking good. One other thing I'll mention about properly managing the machines is that you want to monitor the sales, and if the sales start to dip a little bit, it's probably time for a new prize. It's easy. I see a lot of people get in the habit of just reordering just to get something that, I have to order crane prizes, just reorder what we already have. But we know that when you rotate that prize, it really gives the machine a new look. So customers who are coming in, they see something new. It also can help with the theming in your bowling center. So, Valentine's Day just passed. You could have had Valentine's Day plush in there. You have the NCAA tournament coming up. Maybe you get basketballs from the local team. You can fit with. You can use those machines to fit with themes that are going on throughout your center, just to help make it more exciting and give people something new to see. Mm-hmm. The other thing that is important to manage is the payout and the win rate. So these things are often what's the word? Conflated. So you hear people talk about payout, cost of goods, win rate, and they're all related but different. So if you want your machine to pay out 25% and you're charging $1 a play, and your prize costs $2, well then if you want to keep that payout 25%, the customer can afford to win 1 in 8. If you put something more expensive in there, like $3 in the example, then that customer wins 1 in 12, and it keeps going up. So the more expensive the prize is, if you're charging the same amount, you have to let them win less. And we all know it's from crane operators for generations have been talking about winners make players. So if you're managing the win rate properly and your payouts, a lower cost prize is letting people win more. This is why in recent years people started using Navi balls. They cost you like 25, 30 cents. You can let people win a lot, and sales went up.
So with it, let me ask you a question on that win rate. So I mean, what's right? I saw you had on there 1 in 8, 1 in 12, 1 in 16. What would determine what I should do as a proprietor arcade manager? Where do I start with that? What's the right thing for my crane? Does it matter what product is in it? Is that what drives it? Is my audience what drives it?
Yeah, it's both. We like to start with the cost of goods you want, the payout you want, which 25% is a good place to start. You can move it up or down a little bit, but then it depends on the strength of the prize. So a lot of times people will like to use licensed prizes. If there's a really hot license out there, it's going to cost a lot more, and you're going to have to lower the win rate compared to a generic prize. So So you have to try it, and like a lot of things, it's going to be trial and error. But I can tell you from my experience, a really hot licensed product like Angry Birds was super hot a few years ago. Absolutely makes sense. It drives the sales, but most of the time, a good, nicely themed generic that the factories in our industry are making themselves, not buying with the markup of a license, that lets you have lets you have double the win rate, typically is better. So most of the time, we recommend a themed generic prize as opposed to a licensed one for just this reason.
Okay.
Did I answer your question, John?
Yes, you did. Thank you for that. So what I'm hearing is there's a science to doing cranes, which is the payouts and cost of goods as it is. But then earlier, though, you mentioned, I think, what is the art of the cranes as far as merchandising them and making sure that the eyes are forward and that they're clean and so on. So you also touched on how busy proprietors are, how busy those managers are. And so it sounds like it seems to be a lot of work to manage these cranes, okay? I mean, how can you give some guidance to our viewers on how can they afford to spend time? Why should they spend the time on managing these cranes? How do they do that?
Yeah, it's a good question, John. It is certainly more work than a typical video game that doesn't have any prizes, or even a redemption game that's giving out tickets. Because the ticket games, a lot of the information shows up on your reports. Where with cranes, you have to do a lot of it manually. Even if you can get it to work on the reports, which you can email me if you want to know how to do that. It's a little bit complicated. It still takes a lot of work if you're changing the prizes right now. So what we usually recommend is that you find a young employee, or any employee really, doesn't have to be young, that's interested in business, that they say they want to be an entrepreneur, that's showing some initiative. And this is a good way to be able to afford someone to pay them a little bit extra, to take this person and make them in charge of the cranes. So, Johnny, Susie, whoever the person is, you're going to be in charge of the cranes. We're going to pay you an extra $1 an hour, and here's what you have to do. So you're now a crane manager. It's not as much work as an assistant manager or something like that, but it's a step up that people will appreciate, and they become responsible for filling the machine. So filling the machine also means tracking how many prizes went into the machine. So at the end of the period how many prizes went in. So they also have to calculate the cost of those prizes, including freight. A lot of people don't track freight on cranes, but if the prize is costing $3 each and you gave out 20, you gave out $60 in prizes that week. You just put a little clipboard in the machine, and that person's responsible for either they're filling the machine themselves, or if someone else is, they're the one making sure that the person fills out the journal. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of each week, you look at the sales and you calculate what the actual cost of goods was, and then you can start to really manage your payouts. And monthly or quarterly, you got to do a physical inventory. You should be doing it in the whole facility anyway. But with cranes, it's also important, so that has to be part of the inventory process. So that you're adjusting in case unfortunately, sometimes prizes go out the back door. So if you bought a bunch of prizes and they're not there, and they didn't go into the machine, then where do they go? They might be on a shelf. Someone might have put them in a different storeroom, but that's your money sitting on the shelf. Either way, the inventory is clearly very important and something that's often not done enough. And then once that person starts to understand that the payout and the cost of goods, doing that each week, start to let them experiment with what prizes they want to get. So if they want to order a license prize, that's fine. They have to adjust the strength of the claw so that it's going to have a little bit lower win rate, so that they can keep the cost of goods in check, and give them the freedom to try different things. Mm-hmm. So then they can experiment. This going back to your question earlier, John, about what's the right win rate. If a person is focusing on it and knows their baseline numbers, then they can start to really experiment and get real data. Other than, of course, if you get an expensive license, put it in the machine, and your payout goes up to 75%, yeah, the sales number might look great every week, but the profitability is not. And then, if that person is doing these things and trying and changing the prizes, they're going to boost the sales, and can be 25 to 75% a week. They can easily earn the extra $1 an hour or so that you're paying them to do that.
And that, I love that. That's a great point. Just is to get somebody, show them a career path, teach them something new, and it's going to take a little bit of the burden off that proprietor. So that's a great idea, especially nowadays where it's so hard to get and keep good staff, good team members. So great point. Thanks for bringing that up. So we're about out of time. We got time for one more quick question for you. I mean, I've spoken to you many times in the past. I've seen a lot of articles that you've written. Obviously, you have a lot of experience with cranes, but it goes beyond that. You seem to be passionate about cranes. Why is that?
Yeah, well, they paid for my college. Our family business, Pinnacle, started as a crane route. So we got a test with Walmart with 12 locations to put in some cranes, and we took some things that I learned from my dad and partner from when they were running cranes for a big chain, and we instituted that into Walmart, and then that grew. So we wound up with over 500 cranes and merchandisers. Wow. And I was the guy. I was the young guy that I'm talking about, because I started to be in charge of that, and I was the merchandise manager for the route. And when you have a route like that, where in our case, that route, which was in Walmart, the cranes were 80% of our sales, like, you really focus on it, right? Because that's almost all your revenue. So that's where I really learned about this. So I do have a passion for it. And I also see it so often when I go into bowling centers as an afterthought. And yeah, it's not 80% of the revenue, but it's still there. And we all know in this business, you're paying for a building, which is very expensive, either in rent or if you own it. The equipment's expensive to buy. So ways that we can figure out how to push a little bit of incremental revenue in that box, that's how you really make a lot of profitability, because you're paying for the building, you're paying for a lot of the labor. And if you can push up if you can do all these little things to get another 10% of sales, a lot of that goes to the bottom line. So I think it's important for bowling center operators as well.
Howard, thank you so much for that. I mean, there's in the short time we've had, there's so much to cranes. But thank you for your time, and you've scratched the surface, but I think you've given our viewers a good sense of what it entails, and it can be done, and it can be highly profitable. So thank you for doing that so succinctly. And remember, if you want to learn more, about how to effectively manage your cranes, that art and science of cranes, you can contact Howard directly via email or phone. As we wrap up another edition of the Bowling University Profit Break, remember that when your focus is on growing people, people will grow your business. We look forward to seeing you next time for another great episode. If you have any questions about today's show or would like additional information, you can reach us at any time at education@bpaa.com. Also, you and your team can watch any of our previous episodes 24/7 by visiting bowlinguniversity.net. The Profit Break is now available when you want it, and we have new episodes premiering every month. Until then, I'm John Karabatsis, and do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. We'll see you next time.